From Unity of Houston, Texas, this is The Awakened Life with Reverend Howard Caesar. Unity is a non-denominational spiritual community providing a positive, practical, and progressive approach to Christianity. Let's join the service in progress now with Reverend Howard Caesar.
I like to tell the story about a guy named Antonio, and he was a pizza maker. He had a pizza shop in Italy, and it actually happened to be right across the street in kitty corner from the Vatican Square. And his lifelong dream, Antonio's, was to someday have the Pope call him up and request one of his pizzas. And so he learned how to make the best dough and spin that dough and cook it to perfection. And he learned how to put all the right and perfect ingredients and the right sauces and just to cook a pizza to perfection. And so he waited, and a year went by and never got a call, and several more years went by and didn't get a call. And finally 20 years went by, and one day the head cardinal called and said the Pope had heard about his pizza and wanted a specialty pizza delivered. And so Antonio was excited. He said, "Give me 30 minutes and I'll be right there." So he spun the dough, and he just right. He got the sauce. He got all the ingredients that the Pope had wanted, and he cooked it to perfection. And he put it in a box and wanted to get it there while it was hot. And so he went to go, and he's running out there and trying to cross the street to get over to Vatican Square. The traffic was so bad he couldn't get across, and he wanted to get it there before it got cold. And so he spotted his friend, who was a policeman, Luigi. And he said, Luigi, help me. You know, I have a hot pizza here, and the Pope called me finally after years, and I'm delivering a pizza. I need to. And Luigi said, "What's in it for me?" And Antonio said, "Well, I'll give you half of whatever I received from the Pope." And he said, "Okay." And he stopped the traffic, and he let Antonio across. And Antonio delivered the pizza. And he was coming back and came to Luigi again. And Luigi said, "How did it go?" And Antonio said, "Oh, it was wonderful. It was my life dream to make a pizza for the Pope." And the Pope loved the pizza. And Luigi says, well, give me half of what he gave you." And so Antonio went up to Luigi, and he went, just half the sign of the cross. So what's that all about? Really leads into my lesson. Many a person feels like they're kind of getting half of what life is to be lived. You know, they're only getting half the pizza or half the blessing out of life. They're feeling maybe incomplete, like, you know, there's something missing, something that's left out, that there's another part to life that they may be searching for. And what we're really talking about today is that people sometimes feel disconnected, right? Have you ever felt disconnected maybe from yourself, from life around you, the people, and sometimes certainly God. We can feel disconnected. That's very much sometimes part of the human journey. I have felt at times a sense of disconnectedness. And so there are various things and aspects of life that can move us there. And then there are things that we can do that we can move back to a feeling of connectedness. But those are really things that happen. And some of you here today may feel disconnected, or you may realize you have been at one time or another disconnected. And there are some things that we can learn at one time or another. Sometimes we, feel like, well, we've just gotten away from, our spiritual disciplines, and that can feel like we've disconnected. Sometimes it's that we feel like we've done something bad or wrong, we've messed up, and we have this concept of God, maybe that God is a punishing God, harsh and judgmental, that we project onto our God, a kind of a parental dynamic. And so we're out of God's good graces, at least for a time, and we feel disconnected. And maybe that's not true, but that becomes our experience because we've been conditioned to project onto God that kind of a concept. And sometimes we are feeling disconnected because we're looking at the world and living in a world where a lot of information is being given to us about the insanity of the world, the craziness of the world, some of the things that are so inappropriate in terms of how we treat one another, and some of the harshness and the suffering that may go on in various parts of the world. And when we allow our minds to capture us with that, we can begin to feel a sense of disconnectedness. Sometimes it's simply that we ourselves are going through a difficult time, or a loved one, or a spouse, or someone near and dear to us is going through something difficult, and we feel helpless and hopeless. And that difficult situation, we're not able to just put it in some perspective, and it gnaws at us, gnaws away at us, and it helps us, or it causes us to feel some level of disconnect. And sometimes we're just angry at life because all of these things can mount up. And people have been, at one time or another, been there, where they're angry at life. Why does it have to be like this? Why, we're hurting, or we're hurting because another person is hurting. It's been said that we are spiritual beings having a human experience, and that may be true. But I also think we should not lose sight of the fact that we are spiritual beings here to have a spiritual experience, and that life needs to be not just a human experience. And I know we need to accept our humanity and our humanness for sure. But at the same time, we must not lose sight of the fact that we're here as spiritual beings, and we need to be cultivating and creating spiritual experiences and have it be a spiritual experience. I think the passage in the scripture that is apropos to what we're talking about is the parable of the prodigal son. And the prodigal son was a spiritual being, and he went to a far-off country, and it symbolizes the idea that he felt the lure of the external dimensions of life that took him really away and sort of disconnected, and then he was unfulfilled. Felt separate and apart from home and truth and who he was. And so he returned back home, and his father was there to embrace him and to celebrate that return. And really the celebration is symbolic of a spiritual restoration. It is symbolic of being restored to a sense of being connected again. And it's the kind of celebration or the kind of journey that we sometimes want, go through, because we can go to a far country and then we come back, and then we go to the far country again, and then we come back, and then we go to the far country again. And so we kind of go back and forth because there are different things that are happening and commanding our attention and our focus. And some things take us away from that home connectedness, and then we have to do whatever is necessary to bring ourselves back into a sense of connection. And the spiritual reality or truth is that you never leave the presence of God. You never leave the presence of God. But that is not necessarily always our experience, because there are things and aspects of life that take us out of remembering that truth and realizing that reality. And so, although we are made in the image and after the likeness of God, and that is our reality, we may not always be living from the image and likeness that we are held to be. And so that's part of our journey. So what we're often faced with is our mind that is taking us into separation. Really, when we're lost in our mind alone, in terms of separation, thoughts and dynamics, is when we can feel separate and apart. We're removed from what is the truth here, in spite of the circumstances, in spite of what one is observing or what is happening. We're at a loss at times as to how to put it into a perspective that carries a spiritual aspect to it. And so many of us, I think, live in, at times, disconnectedness from the truth and the reality of really who we are. And we forget that. We don't show up. There is an ideal, and that ideal is not always our experience. So I want to share with you, there's at least 5 areas that seem to contribute to a person's becoming disconnected. And it's not because we want to help you get more disconnected. It's out of the awareness that these things can be what it is that's grabbing you and taking you into a sense of disconnected. Or you can remember, oh yeah, that's what did it to me last time. Now I'm aware, and I'll head that off. So there are different signs of disconnect, and there's different areas and different things that happen. And one of them, of those 5, is having to do with feeling rushed, that life is always rushing us, and that we get caught up in a pace. And in that pace, we then lose ourselves. And like there's not enough time in a day, there are not enough hours, there are many obligations, there are many responsibilities, there's just not enough time. We feel rushed and pushed. And it is said that Americans will buy anything that promises to help them go faster. Whether it's cars or whatever. There's a guy, author Richard Swenson, he is quoted to say this. He said, just take a look at our lives, he said. We send packages by Federal Express. We use a long-distance company called Sprint. We manage our personal finances on Quicken. We schedule our appointments with day runners. We diet with Slim Fast. And we swim in trunks made of Speedo. That's his quote. Some do, not everyone. But some of us never slow down, you know. We rush to church, we rush back to the parking lot, we rush back home, or we rush to have fast food and get on to whatever, and everything is a rush. I could say more about this, but we don't have time. So the second area is choice overload. You know, there are so many decisions that we are asked to make, and there are so many choices. 100 years ago or so, if you needed to wash your hair, you would simply go get your lye soap, L-Y-E, and wash your hair. Well, today, there are literally over 1,200 different kinds of shampoo. 1,200 different kinds of shampoo. There's shampoo for oily hair, dry hair, limp hair, damaged hair, colored hair, hair with dandruff, hair without dandruff. There's shampoo that smell like flowers or fruits or vegetables or whatever, you know. We're in choice overload. There are over 2,000 different skincare products. There are tennis shoes that are over 100 kinds of makers of tennis shoes. Oh my gosh, I've seen stores in the mall where, I mean, I've never walked in, but I see walls of just sneakers, tennis shoes. Years ago, if you wanted to watch TV, and I know I'm dating myself, there were like 3 networks. 3 networks. And so you knew exactly what was coming on when. Now there are hundreds of channels. There is like 100,000 programming selections to pick from per week. When I was a kid or a young man and I went out to buy a car, there was the Pontiac, the Chevy, the Ford, the Buick, maybe 1 or 2, an Edsel, which didn't hang around. And that was it. And there might have been 2 models of that. There might have been a two-door, a 4-door, and a station wagon to choose from. But now, wow, choice overload. I can't keep up with the names of what they are. It's amazing. So choice overload. 3 is information overload. And we are in the information age, and we have, you know, there's the information highway that we're all going on, and more information, faster than ever. And we are the most informed people in history. And the question is, are we the wisest? And so information is taking over instead of wisdom. And wisdom is of a whole nother vibration. And there are people that are, you know, so full of distraction, and they're on their cell phones, and they're either, you know, They're either on their computer or they're, have you ever looked around at an airport? There's nobody talking to anybody. They're all in, doing something with something. Anyway, wisdom is knowing who we are, all right? And relating to the divine self. And so overload of information is flooding our mind. And again, that sweeps us away from a feeling of being connected. And number 4 is basically that we can experience a sense of stagnation or superficiality. Stagnation and superficiality. Our relationship with ourselves, our relationship with others, our relationship with the divine, a feeling we're not deepening, we're not growing. That's our assessment of ourselves. We feel stuck, and we're kind of living only on the surface of things, spiritually and every other way. Our prayer life may become sporadic. We're no longer meditating. Our disciplines spiritually have gone away. Spirituality might have become, for a time, a duty, an obligation, an afterthought, some kind of secondary or lower level priority. And so that kind of process can go on, and we're swept up in the busyness, all the things, and there's many reasons we can use and justify in our mind, but that's what can happen and can lead to a feeling of disconnect. We go to a restaurant and we are eating the food and we don't even experience the food. We're just taking it down. And we're not experiencing life. It's very superficial and kind of a stagnation, just going through the motions. And it's time, again, to listen to Spirit. There's a friend and a speaker who was here, Joe Dispenza, several years back, and he's an author, and he was also in the movie What the Bleep Do We Know? And anyway, when he was here, we were able to share a lunch together, and he confided and shared with me that he hadn't had a whole day at his home in over a year. He had had a portion of a day, a few, but he had not had a whole day at his home for a whole year. And he said that he refused as a presenter to present superficially, and that he was moving into that superficial part where he was just in the material, but giving the material, but not part of the material. And that he realized he needed a break. And so he took a 6-week sabbatical. And he went totally away from speaking or lecturing or doing workshops or presenting. And he said it really helped him a lot. It reconnected him again. And the beauty of it was that he listened to that. And he also was aware of that. And he took some steps. And he refreshed. He was restored back and connected once again. And so number 5 is simply having an experience of a diminished or decreased ability to love. The essence of who we are is not getting through. We've lost touch with it because of our busyness, because of choice overload, because of information overload, tiredness, skimming the surface in every area. And so we can have this spiritual disconnect, and we even become potentially irritable. We don't like ourselves. We don't like much of anything. Everything irritates us, and we're tired. And we aren't as sensitive as we once were. We're not as understanding as we once were. We're not as patient as we could be, all of these things. And so if we're feeling any of these, and less love, less energy, less aliveness, and we're skimming the surface and we're just, going through the motions, it is what spiritual disconnect feels like. You're stuck. These are signs. So what do we do? What do we do? So there's a way of living that doesn't conceal the divine self, but reveals it. And it requires participation, it requires discipline of some sort, and it's remembering our reality that we are one with God. Even though that may not be our experience all the time, it's going back to remembering that. And there is a piece of writing in the book of Psalms, and it was offered over 3,000 years ago. And it's still repeated today, and it is often a favorite for many a person. In fact, when I was given my Bible at my church as a young boy, it was the first thing that I memorized, and it was the 23rd Psalm. And the 23rd Psalm basically is life-giving. And if you look at the first, four aspects, or there are four practices actually in the first several stanzas that are very, very powerful. And they provide four practices that I think help us move towards reconnection. And so do not underestimate the lines of that psalm and why it is so popular and why people of all the 100 and some psalms gravitate to that and know that one. It starts with "The Lord is my shepherd." And we may be in choice overload, but there is really only one decision to make, and that is who is going to be your shepherd. Every day you get up and you decide who's going to be my shepherd, who's going to lead me, who's going to guide me, who's going to give me the answers, who's going to show me the way. And Einstein said the fundamental decision every person must make is the universe friendly? Well, I say the fundamental decision that every person must make on a daily basis is who's going to be my shepherd? Who is that? Who's in charge? And rather than being an isolated person and saying, oh, I'm on my own here, I have to fly alone, I have to make this decision, I have to do this, I have to do that. No. You got to get back to there is the Lord, there is a presence and a power that is shepherding you. You need to remember that. You need to check in with that. Okay? And so we need to have that inner dialogue reestablished. And whatever problem we have, what do I do about this? What do I do about that? What do I do with this problem at my work, this problem in my relationship, this difficult decision? Well, help me, shepherd me, show me. There is a wisdom and an all-knowingness. And then the second part is, I shall not want. And, if I shall not want, it really means that I'm free. Because I need to be free of all the things that bind me. And I have to disconnect from self-pity and from discontent and all of the insatiable wantings that are part of thinking that I need all that outer something to satisfy me. Because we get hit with advertising all the time. Use me, buy me, wear me, try me. It'll make you happier, whether it's a car, whether it's certain clothes, whether it's whiter teeth, whether it's fresher breath, a sleeker body. I mean, it goes on and on that somehow you will be happier. So I shall not want. If I follow this shepherd, I'm not going to be living in want. I'm going to remember to balance that with what I have. And what I have, I can be thankful for. It's so important to be thankful and grateful because that connects you back to the heart, gets you out of the head. And so it's very important. You couldn't reaffirm to yourself a statement like, I will not surrender my inner peace for any kind of external condition. I will practice simplifying. And so we're talking about simplifying your life and not trying to run and dash and get this here and everything else that says, I want this, I want that, because then I'll feel whole, and then you find out that's not true. So the Lord is my shepherd, and if I follow that shepherd, I shall not want. I shall not live totally in want, which is in not having. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. There's a writer, Philip Keller, who writes about this, about sheep. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He said, there are several conditions under which sheep will not lay down. Sheep are timid creatures, and as long as they are afraid, they won't lay down. They are social creatures, and sometimes there is tension going on in the flock. And if there is fighting going on in the flock, they will not lay down. They are creatures of appetite, and so if they are empty inside or hungry, they will not lay down. They will not lay down unless they are free from fear, free from tension, and free from hunger. We are like sheep. We really are. We're like that. If we're fearful, if we're tense or feeling that we need something, that we don't even know what it is, but we tend to get busy. We don't lay down in green pastures. We start getting busy. We're on the move. We're looking for what that is. We have iPhones. We're talking, we're texting, we're Twittering, we're Facebooking, we're, on and on. We're busy. We're busy. And we've lost ourselves, really. And so the grass is always greener on the other side of the fence, right? And so we're always jumping. Anywhere we can see it a little bit greener, we're going to jump to that other side of that fence, back and forth and here and there. And whatever it is that we don't have that we think will make us whole. The promise here, he makes me lie down in green pastures, is that in any place I am can become a green pasture. All right, it can feed me. Even though I live in a world where bad things happen and there are challenges and whatever, the Lord is my shepherd. God will provide for me a resting place. In the midst of whatever, there are green pastures, okay? In the middle of my workplace, in the middle of my home, in the middle of relationship tension, this problem, that problem, there is green pasture if I'm willing to let the divine be my shepherd and show me. He leads me beside still waters, stillness. That is very, very important, to have times of prolonged periods of stillness. In America, we are inundated with noise, the noisiest generation ever. And you know, do you ever pull up next to a car that has a boom, boom speakers going, and your car starts rocking, and you don't have the radio on or the CD or anything? Research says that most Americans leave their TV sets on, and when asked the reason, they say the noise is comforting. And average Americans watch 4 hours of television per day. 66 of us eat dinner with the TV on. And at 4 hours a day, at the 72nd year of life, you will have watched 12 years of TV time. And it is 4 hours that is 1/4 of every year's working or waking hours. And so that equates to basically 3 months out of every year's waking hours, you are in front of a TV. Research by a family therapist, lady. She studied numerous families and taped them, and the two most often used phrases were, "What's on?" and "Move over." So, we are tired, we're lifeless, and we're disconnected because we've made bad choices sometimes. And he leads me beside still waters means gets back to practicing stillness. So if you do all of these things, if you know the Lord is your shepherd and that you shall not want and are not lost in want, and it allows it to, you know, have you lie down in green pastures and be led to still waters, what happens? The next statement is, he restores your soul. You're taken from disconnect into connectedness again. You're restored back to connectedness. And so really the secret is really clearing some space in you, making some room, you know. It's our part is removing the obstacles, getting out of our mind and into our heart, having some quietness, listening, and letting the Lord be your shepherd. We all want to be able to be connected, and there are moments when we are not. So here is the 23rd Psalm. If you don't know it, memorize it, make it your friend. It has been all my life. God bless you.
Thank you for joining us for today's message. We invite you to be with us again next Sunday. Unity is inclusive, welcoming people of all walks of life in dignity and love. We believe that love, strength, and goodness dwells within you. May we all live in unity with God, humanity, and all of God's creation. And remember, as Reverend Caesar says, life is meant to be good.